Hi, I'm Edric,
I'm Joy.
and we're here to help you.
Get it right from the start.
So it's a new year,
Mm-hmm.
and we are very excited for this guest of ours because, he is very close to us, but we rarely have these face-to-face moments with him. And so we took advantage of the time that he's with us to the New Year transition and the holidays. So voila, we have our guest, our eldest son, Elijah. Elijah, say a couple words before we get started.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Really great to be back home with family. And it just reminds me of what a joy it is to be with the people that you love and you're called to be with. And why I really appreciated my parents all these years.
And speaking of,
My smile
all
is
these
very
years,
big because
yeah, Joy, go ahead, baby.
I think Edric knows that it's been especially painful for me as a mother to have Elijah away for the past 3 years. But at the same time, I think one of the reasons why we're doing this podcast is because we've also seen him grow in so many ways, even from a distance. And we wanted to cover for this first topic, we really wanted to talk about how important grit is and what kind of role parents can play in helping their children really develop that sense of grit, that sense of perseverance, which is so essential for success in life. And I know, Elijah, you've had different stories, having been away and nobody really there to help you through your deepest, darkest seasons in college. But maybe we can lead off with,
And before you do that,
Yeah.
just to be clear, it's not like we were not there for him, right? Because when you said nobody was there for you, it's harder for him because of the distance, the time zones, etc. So just laying that out there for everyone that's listening, they might think, "Oh, you just abandoned your son." That's not what's happening. But
same way
Correct.
where we could hug him.
Correct.
We could console him sometimes at the very moment when these things are happening. So it's changed. The dynamic has changed.
For
'Cause
sure.
Sometimes we'll call him and maybe the difficult thing happened like 3 days ago. So Elijah, maybe we can start off with, what do you feel, maybe in this last year even, was one of the biggest challenges that you faced as a college student? You're now going into your last year.
One of the biggest challenges that I faced was learning what it means to be responsible. I think it is Viktor Frankl in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, where he says that part of what gives meaning to life is the ability to take on responsibility and living a more independent life in the US, not entirely according to what I would want or what would be most comfortable to me, has been good for building that responsibility because it's required me to settle down and think about things like, how am I going to start providing for myself? How am I going to start getting myself around, start eating, start cooking, things that I wouldn't have been able to do if I was living in a more comfortable environment. And so I think what really helps about having a change of scenery is being confronted with the new challenges that come with that scenery and being able to respond to that, to have the grit to take on that responsibility is very meaningful.
Yeah, and I think there was something that you shared with us this past year that happened over the summer, which had to do with your internship experience, where you were given a task, like your mentor gave you guys each $100, and you had to multiply that in a single day. And there was a very interesting story that came with that, and I think that is an example of a story of grit. So maybe you could share what happened.
Lou, that's a long story, but I guess we have the time for that today. So just for some context, this summer I interned in Ohio, Western Ohio, with a Christian businessman. And what his goal for the entire internship was to teach each of the 8 guys who came to join him there for the summer the art of entrepreneurship, how to think like an entrepreneur, how to make deals, how to close deals, how to think about finances, and every aspect of a business. And one of the capstones that he had for us at the end of the whole summer was one Saturday morning, he got us together and said, I have a challenge for you guys, which he, of course, prepared us for beforehand. I'm going to give you each $100. You'll go out in teams of 2 each. And your goal today is to have a business in a day, to make as much money as you can in one day with this $100. So I went out with my friend. We thought we were really clever. We had a scheme to get rich really quickly. It was we were going to put up a billboard because this entrepreneur mentor of ours owned a billboard company, and he had some vacant faces on these billboards. So we said, we'll just put up one for free using an old tarpaulin that we painted, saying, please send us money. Here's our the equivalent of Gcash in the US. Here's our Gcash. Send it here. We're trying to win a game, a bet. So we put that up there, and we just sat back and we said, all right, we're going to win. But what else can we do today? So we thought about other businesses. And then as we were thinking and just biding our time, the other teams started giving us how much they were making.
They're giving you updates.
They were giving us updates in real time of what they were making. And we were like, oh man, they've almost broke even. We need to start hustling. We haven't made a single cent from this billboard. No one's sending us money. Wonder why.
Can I tell you why?
I think it was pretty clear by the end.
Let's hear
why
his
no one would
input
send us
first.
money. So we're like, okay, well, what can we do to make money? Maybe we can be Grab drivers for a day. So we tried to sign up for Grab. All applications were closed. It was a Saturday. No one was processing anything. I had some software that I wanted to sell to people, so I tried to sell software. We made a few calls. All the businesses we called were like, sorry, why are you calling us on a Saturday to sell us software? I don't think that's a good idea. And so we were like, you know what? You're right. Let's not do that. So we changed again. We were like, what other possible thing that we can do that won't go wrong? If this billboard doesn't work out, what can we do? My friend said, I have a friend who will give us $1,000 or $2,000 if he gets half of the winnings from the other teams.
Oh, you have to explain that because
Yes. And so the reason why that was going to work, that might have worked, was the whole game for the business in the day was if you, as one of the 4 teams, make the most money in that day, you get to take home the earnings of all the other teams.
Oh.
And you have to pay back your $100 to the mentor who gave us the money at the start. And so we had to make our money back. But if we did have money extra, we stood to lose it because the other teams could take it. And so we were pretty cutthroat. We were like, let's just use this leverage from someone else and put it into our fund and say, we made this money, but we're going to give it back to the person afterward. It turns out my friend kept calling his friend. He was like, please, will you give us this money? And he said, actually, I don't want to risk it with you guys. You guys seem like you're not really put together. This team doesn't have anything else going for it. So we were like, oh no, what are we going to do? Well, one thing that you can do in the US that can never go wrong, completely idiot proof, is a lemonade stand. And so it turns out we had all the necessary skills to have a lemonade stand. We were, grown adults. We could do this. So we went to the grocery store. We bought lemonade supplies. We bought the powder. We bought the water. And we bought the ice. And we thought we could make it really fancy with ice in clear cups. So we'll sell it for 5 times the cost that it took to make money. And we'll definitely at least catch up to the other teams, not embarrass ourselves at the end of the day. We get the supplies. And then we go to set up our booth. And to set up our booth, we don't have a table or anything. We have absolutely nothing because we didn't prepare for this the day before. But what we did have was a lot of billboard tarpaulins because we hadn't done all the billboards that we were going to put up. So we were like, what if we just use the billboard things for a lemonade stand? So we paint the billboard and say, lemonade, $5, come buy our lemonade. Fresh, ice cold. We put it in the trunk. We put the paint in the trunk of the car. And we drive away. And this wasn't our car. This was the mentor's car. He lent it to us because my friend had lost his keys at the start of the day. So he was a little bit frantic about losing his keys, but we couldn't do anything. We had to make the money. So we just drove off we got our billboards, we had our lemonade, we were going to go to this festival. A friend was going to give us a spot there. It was going to be great. But while we were driving to the festival, we got a little anxious because it was already late in the day, like afternoon, and we only had until 6 p.m. So we drove a little fast, and then we saw a police car behind us.
You're kidding me. So I'm hearing the story in detail just right now, just as an interruption to Elijah. I want to get to the main thing. And so, police car.
The police car pulls us over, and he says, I pulled you over because you were going 20 miles per hour over the speed limit in this area. And I'm going to write you a ticket. He didn't even give us any of the nice talk because he saw us. We were like college-age punks. So pulled us over, and we were waiting there. My friend was like, hey, we just got $5 from our billboard. And it was a friend of his who had driven by and felt bad for him because he had shared it with a friend. So we were not making any money that day. But I was like, we've got to have the grit. We've got to push through and finish this because it's important that we push through. Even if we embarrass ourselves, even if we lose his money and we have to pay him for what we did, we've got to finish. So, comedy of errors. We get pulled over. Well, the one good thing that happened to us that day was the police officer said, you know what? My ticket printer machine is not working, so I can't write you a ticket. I can't. This is crazy. This has never happened to me before. So you're free. So we drove off pretty fast, actually, to go to our thing. When we get there, we open the trunk of the car.
Yeah.
And the paint that we had used to paint the sign had spilled in the trunk of our friend's car that wasn't even ours after we had gotten a speeding ticket, after we had failed 3 businesses that day. And it was a disaster. I'd never gotten paint spilled in the back of a car before. So I did what I knew how to do best. I stood there with my mouth open like this. And I was like, do you know what to do? He was like, no, I don't know what to do. I think we have to clean it. I was like, yeah, but we have to make money, right? He was like, no, I think we have to clean the car. So at that point, I was like, there's grit, but there's also we damaged this guy's car, so we should probably clean out the car. And so we spent the rest of our grit that day cleaning out the car, pressure washing it with the hose, getting all the paint out.
Did people see you doing this?
Did people see us doing this? Yes. The dad of our mentor was there with us to help us out in his house. We actually came to his house sheepishly. We were like, hey, do you have anything that we can use to help clean this?
Weren't you embarrassed?
So
It was so embarrassing. But
did you get to sell lemonade?
no, we didn't sell $1 of lemonade.
No lemonade, no sales.
No sales at all. But at the end of the day, I made 10 cents from doing surveys online.
So the moral of the story and the lesson here, I'd love to hear your thoughts, is
Thinking.
because the whole episode is about grit.
Yeah.
So
So this gets to the moral of the story. The moral of the story is that wasn't really a story of grit, even though I wanted to show grit in that moment. I'd read this book called Grit by Angela Duckworth, and it talks about how the people who succeed, the people who are able to make things happen, are not always those who have the most talent or the most innate things given to them. They're the people who are able to take those things and multiply them through the power of grit, through following through with what they do. And so I really wanted to apply that in this situation, but it didn't work out. And that was extremely, extremely frustrating to me because I have difficulty dealing with failure. And one of the things that Angela Duckworth actually talks about in her book is that this mindset of approaching failure is actually really critical to becoming a person of grit. I'd self-assessed myself on the grit scale when I read the book. And I tried to be honest with myself. I'm a little cynical, but I got a pretty low score in terms of Angela Duckworth's scale of what makes a gritty person. And I think part of what I trace that back to is this fear of failure. And I think what God allowed to happen that day, in the business in a day, making negative $80 was
I thought you said you made 10 cents.
negative $80 plus the 10
Net.
cents of the profit. So maybe negative $80,
Overall.
negative $79.90. Really what it was failure is not final. And I talked to the mentor afterward, and he said, yeah, some people are born with some innate abilities to do business. But if you want to do business, Elijah, if you want to really pursue this, all that you really need to do is to want it, to have that desire. And that's one thing that Duckworth talks about in her book as well. To be gritty, you need to really want what you're going after. And if you really want what you're going after and you believe that is what is your true calling, it becomes something that is a lot easier to be gritty about because you know it is right and you know that you're willing to push through with it. And I reflected on my life and the different moments where I've had to push through obstacles, knocking on doors, trying to get people to vote against abortion, for example, in different states in the US. When I know what I'm doing is right, when I know that it is good and I want it, then God gives me the grace to make it happen. And I have the motivation to make it happen. And then the grit kind of follows from that. And so that was the lesson from that story. It was really funny how it all turned out. Justin, our mentor, his name's Justin, he said he'd never laughed that hard in a very long time. And he got a good laugh. It was such a good laugh that he said, you know what, you don't have to pay me back. I'll just give you the money. It was so nice of him. And the rest of the teams also decided to be gracious. They said, you know, someone offered to lend us $2,000 if we would give them half the winnings. we were just like chuckling under our breath because that was the same thing that happened to us. And we turned it down, they said, because we wanted to be able to give you back all that you made. So you get to keep what you made. And we were like, yes, we get to keep our negative losses, whatever. So that story was a really good lesson, and that failure was not final.
Thanks, Elijah. I wanted to interrupt. Really, yes, super quick. I think to many people who are watching this and who are listening also, I think a key question is, you define grit well using Duckworth's book, which really became the buzz when you talk about grit today. You also told at length your story, which had a nice, interesting turn to it. Question would be, what do you think is the problem of many young people today when it comes to grit? We've interviewed your brother, who represents kind of, I'm hitting the adult age, 18, I'm coming to college, but you're a full-fledged adult now, 21.
22 and
turning 22. So what is your lens on what is the issue when it comes to grit for people, whether US context or even the Philippine friends you have here, right? And then the second question would be how to address that.
I think I can answer both of those in one. But the root of it, for a lot of people that I see who struggle to follow through with things, to finish things, is fear of failure. And I think fear of failure comes from not having been exposed to a lot of failure. Sports kind of helps with this because through sports, you're able to see what it means to win, but also what it means to lose. It was a gift to be able to train competitively for swimming for a while back in my teenage years, because I felt what it was like to win. I also felt what it was like to lose, and lose even after you put in all this effort. Just like how in the business, I put in all this effort to learn over the summer what it means to be a business person, and still didn't do that well at the end because of things that I prepared. That failure can be an opportunity to learn is not something you really see until you're exposed to failure a lot of times. And so by giving kids more responsibility for their actions, by giving them more opportunities to fail, and not catching them and giving them a safety net when they're about to fail, parents can allow their children to see the value of failure in their life, to learn that there's more to the game than just winning or losing, that there's this bigger game, the game of life. I like to think of it as a meta game of winning or losing depends not on the outcome of this little game that you're playing, but on your disposition, your heart disposition, your motivations toward the game, how hard you worked, and how you really looked before the face of God, coram Deo, in light of all that, because that's the most important thing.
So can I just ask you, like, if you were to do some things over again in your life, because you've had experiences now where you have failed and you've been frustrated, do you do a self-assessment and also say, okay, these are the things that I could have done better. These are the choices that I could have made. That's part of the learning process, right? Because you can fail, but then you can learn nothing. So what are the things that you have learned? Because I'm very curious as your mother to know what sort of things you want to do better in order to avoid failing, because it's not necessary to also
Yeah.
fail.
Yeah. Failure is painful. You don't want it, uh, for sure. And after failing, I think coming into it with that mindset of what is the disposition of your heart? How is your motivation? How are you approaching this? Allows you to come out of it with, how can I learn from this? Rather than, man, I'm such a sore loser. Like, I really lost today. Initially, when I lost that business game, I felt like a loser. I just felt like I had lost big time. And you know what? Maybe business is not for me. I'll go into, I don't know, interpretative dance or something.
Being sarcastic. That's the
Being
American
Yes.
sarcasm that's still carried over.
But, after reflecting on my time that day, I'll use this because it's a concrete example. I realized that my attitude coming into it was a little bit prideful, right? Assuming that, our billboard would be so good that people would just give us money out of the blue, that could have replaced hard work and preparation. And the kind of preparation we were doing was trying to be creative, trying to break the game instead of playing by the rules of the game. And learning from how other people who did succeed, who not only tripled, quadrupled, quintupled, they actually made 20x their money in the day. 20x, 25x.
What did they do?
They cleared trees from people's yards.
In other words, manual labor.
They did manual labor.
Simple.
It was very simple. And they planned it out beforehand. They got the people who would rent them the equipment on the day for very cheap because they were friends of theirs in the neighborhood. And they used the experiences that they had in manual labor jobs to do that. And so playing to your strengths, not approaching it in pride, and preparing. Some things which are really, really simple. I guess you don't always have the common sense to do that. And that's something that I learned from.
Well,
Yeah,
can I say something quickly?
Yes, please.
Because I've known you, right, all your life. And one of the things that I think can sometimes be an issue for people who are very capable, like yourself, is that you can rely on your capabilities to wing things. And I know that throughout the course of your college experience, I think you've learned that you really have to put in the work. You really have to push hard. You really have to have grit, because you're with people who are super excellent, really capable, highly intelligent. And I think it's been a good thing for you to be humbled in that sense, because you realize I can't just like overnight be successful. I really have to put in the work. And I just want to say that we're very proud of you, because you have worked really hard. But I think that God wanted you to be in the US for this season, because if you had been at home, where you could just kind of laze about and, be programming and coding on a computer, which is easy for you, and you could get by with your education, I don't think you would have learned these things. So I'm really happy that God allowed you to be in situations where it was uncomfortable.
Right. And this is why we're having the podcast. So Joy can say this to him right now. No, I'm kidding. I want to just add to that as we wind down this episode, because there's so much more we want to talk to Elijah about, right? Just two things. And also, as I've observed you, we've had key moments together, even as father and son, where I've seen you show this grit. And to those that have followed me or heard me speak, I've shared this quite a number of times that relate to your swimming moments, right? But I want to just land on two really quick things. Is you quoted Duckworth's book about grit. And so for everyone who's maybe not read this, a really critical piece there, which is practical for parents, is developing a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset, right? And let me just say this for you before you Google it or, chat GPT this. In a nutshell, it's not telling your kids things like, you're so smart, you're so beautiful, you're so talented, because when you say those things, it puts a label in their mind and they will have a fear of failing. Because if I don't do these things, then mom or dad or people will think, I'm not that. I'm not smart. I'm not talented. I'm not good looking, right? So all of these things can be dangerous. Instead, the growth mindset is you focus on what they can control. As Joy pointed out, for example, the effort. And so if you heard even just our podcast dialogue right now, Joy was all about, Elijah, we're so blessed by the hard work you put in. And even just observing that is what helped you do well through your college season. It is the grunt work. And that effort is something that is controllable and can be transferred across. So that is so important. As we think about grit, help children develop a growth mindset, not a fixed one by the things we might say. And one last really critical thing, Elijah talked about how it's so important to help children experience failures so that they can, even as they're doing those things early on, not develop a fear, but able to move past it. So I want to just add a very quick line that I learned from either Elon Musk, or John Maxwell. He said, we must fail fast. What does that mean? So even as we're dealing with our kids' failure, it's not like we will keep giving them opportunities to fail, but help them process it so that as they're dealing with it, they can say, okay, now that I've done this, what do I do about it now? Instead of dwelling on it, or instead of focusing so much on that, and it does not help them move forward. So I just want to add those two minutes as we close.
And I think because, a lot of times as parents, when we're so hung up on our children's success and them being a certain way for our own pride, then we put so much pressure on them, right?
Yep.
And I think that's also why we rescue them, because we are so afraid of appearances, like the wrong sort of appearances. And so I think it's a twofold thing. On the one hand, let's be careful about the words we use, because the words we say today become like the voice in the head of our children, the heads of our children. They're going to remember those things. If we're super negative, super critical, then they're going to be super afraid of failing. But secondly, when we know that they're doing something wrong or they're making some wrong choices, if there are consequences attached to that, then we need to allow them to experience those consequences.
Totally agree.
So that it enlightens them and makes them realize, okay, this is not how to do things, and I need to improve. So just to
For sure. And I think when as a final note, as a parent, when you look at those moments where you will allow them to fail, you need to ask, is it critical? Because obviously there are some things we do not want them, if it's life and death, for example, right? So otherwise, take a step back, allow them to experience it, and they will develop this grit that we're talking about. So, hey, Elijah, we got more to do, more episodes to churn out together. So thank you guys for joining us. Once again, I'm Edric.
I'm Joy.
And we're here to help you
Get it right from the start.